Welcome back to another today's anatomy question. I'm Lizzie Lassiter. Joining us today is the ever informative Mary Richards. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Lizzie.
The couple websites before we get started today, we're talking about bony landmarks of the shoulder blades. So what we can feel and see in a yoga context and why it's important for the back body there. Okay, so number one, Yoga with Mary Richards. This is Mary's website. You can go there, sign up for her newsletter, see what Mary is up to, look at her calendar where she's teaching. And then I hope you're subscribed to our experiential anatomy newsletter, which you can find here at experientialanatomy.yoga. If you want just my website, it's here, lizzie.yoga. You can sign up for my Sunday newsletter. I send out every Sunday a newsletter. And last thing I'll show you before we get started. Ooh, not this. Not the shoulder blades. I want to show you Mary Richards first, but hopefully not last.
Definitely not last. Definitely not
This
last.
has just been published. It's so fantastic. Teach people, not poses, lessons in yoga, anatomy, and functional movement to unlock body intelligence. I will put the link directly to this below in the description. You should definitely get yourself a copy. Mary, we're so proud of you.
Thank you. I can't, I look at that. I actually look at bookshop.org and amazon.com every day to look at that just because it's a dream come true. I mean, for 40 years, I'm 53 now, and I've wanted to write a book since I was 13, So like, I just look at it and I'm just like, life
That's
is
mega.
good,
It's mega. You worked so hard on it. It's such an excellent, I've seen the manuscript. It is such an excellent compendium. And it's so rich and detailed. It's a great resource for yoga teachers and serious students, body enthusiasts, anatomy nerds, aspiring anatomy nerds.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I'm super, super stoked.
All right, we're talking today about the upper extremity, the shoulder blades, the back body here. Why is this even an important region to focus on? I can't see it. I don't really know what's going on back there. Why do we care?
Well, because the shoulder blade is the key to the shoulders. And, in a previous today's anatomy question, we went through the bony landmarks, primarily of the front of the rib cage and the collarbones and the like. And now we turn our attention to the shoulder blades because they're so intimately related to the rib cage and the collarbones, because all of that is related to the shoulder girdle. That song about our parts being connected is really true. The knee bone is connected to the thigh bone, and the scapulae, the shoulder blades, are connected to the collarbones and the ribs, as well as the arm bones. So we look at the shoulder blades from this posterior view, and we can see how irregular the shoulder blades look. They're not you look at the arm bones, and that's a pretty, linear looking shape. Yeah.
Yeah.
But we look at the shoulder blades, and there are all of these ridges and things sticking out and depressions. And a lot of those we cannot feel because they're enrobed with layers of myofascial tissue, of muscle and fascia. But there are several really important aspects of the shoulder blades that we can actually feel with our fingertips, and we want to, because the shoulder blades are the key to our arm movements. Okay. Did you have something, Lizzie?
I inhaled. I was going to say that that's something that I learned studying with you, is the idea of when you're moving your arm, think of moving your shoulder blade. When in yoga, when you're stabilizing the arms, like in plank, that's a different thing. We want to hold the shoulder blades in and use them to help us stabilize. But when we're moving the arm, that movement should all, I'm gonna show here. So that movement should also come from the shoulder blade, as opposed to this artificial idea that has been handed down somehow through the mists of yoga time, that we should stabilize the shoulder blade while we move the arm.
Right. And see, the fascinating thing about the shoulder in general, so we talk about the shoulder joint, and we tend to think of it just being where the arm comes into the side body. Of course, the head of the arm bone is fitting loosely into the shallow depression that is created by the side of the shoulder blade.
I know, but that's like not something that most people have. I know because I didn't, like, that's not something that we have in the front of our consciousness, that the shoulder joint, I guess I just assumed like the humerus, the upper arm bone here just kind of like comes into the side of the body and there's the ribs. I never really thought about what was forming that joint. A joint is two bones at least. So it's like this scapula right here, you can see this is where the shoulder joint is happening. Like, that was not clear to me before I started studying anatomy with you.
Yeah, and if we look at it from pocket anatomy, look how big that space is. So that aspect of the shoulder blade is called the glenoid fossa. Again, fossa means cave, and it's a shallow depression in the side of the shoulder blade. And you see that the arm bone, the humeral head, just sort of sits off a bit to the side, and it's held into that shallow depression by lots of connective tissue.
Yeah, these are only sort of like closely related. They're not like, and I can show that for contrast because you mentioned that like the hip joint is a very deeper, more intimate relationship almost.
Yeah, and there's a full bony circle for the hip socket. It's a full bony circle, whereas the side of the shoulder blade, it's almost like the top of the tibia, the shin bone, very shallow depression that the end of the humerus, or in the case of the knee, look how shallow those depressions are as we look at the knee on the top of the shin bone. And then the thigh bone, the condyles of the thigh bone, they just sort of sit on top of those shallow wells. And the shoulder is sort of analogous in that way. And the thing about shoulders in particular is a lot of the time we're doing movements where we're just moving the arm, when we're reaching for things, when we're working on the keyboard or driving the car, massaging our phones and the like. So we're often going against the joint cavity in the shoulder, which creates more friction and more opportunity for wear and tear, which is why a lot of us will get sore in the shoulders, okay? Because we tend to be moving the arm bone against the joint concavity.
As opposed to moving the joint around the arm bone.
Yes, and what we really want to do is, even when you're trying to get the cookies that you've hidden in the top shelf of the corner cabinet, you want to make sure you're not reaching with your arm, but you actually slide your shoulder blade up in the direction that you're moving your arm, because then the arm just follows and you're going to have a lot more range of motion. Okay, so you can hide things maybe even on an upper shelf when you move like that, because you're not then just thinking about moving the arm. Okay, so
one of my 3.5-year-old twin sons has made a click in the past 2 weeks, and when he wants, until 2 weeks ago, we could put things we didn't want them to touch just above, and now Felix is kind of like realized he can get a chair or a stool and climb up and get things. So reorganizing some of the safety zones in my house. But it's so funny because it's like he's realized that, but he hasn't figured out that he needs to cover his track. So he just leaves the chair sitting there.
Yeah.
And it's just like, coming to my studio and I'm like, Felix, what were you getting up here on my top shelf where it's just like my pens and my makeup and what were you?
Yeah. Nothing. I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, it's really interesting. So this is a life skill for us, especially if we have littles in the house and we have things that we would like to keep them out of. If you move from your shoulder blades when you're stashing things up high, you're going to be able to put them up higher.
And what can we feel, or should we try to feel on the physical body? Do we want to touch things?
Yes. Okay. So let's start first with the top of the shoulder. Okay. So if you just take your fingers to the top of your shoulder, you'll feel this bony ridge. this cap, and that's called the acromion process, and that forms the roof, the top of the shoulder. It keeps the arm bone from continuing up, past our ears. And then if you walk your fingers down and back onto your shoulder blade, you'll feel, and you can kind of walk your fingers toward the base of your neck. You may be able to feel a bony ridge, but odds are what you're going to feel is you're going to feel your meaty upper trapezius muscle.
Grumpy.
Yes, it is grumpy for a lot of us, and a lot of it is because we don't use our shoulder blades to move our shoulders. Okay, so traps get tight, but that's another discussion. But what you're feeling when you feel your upper trap muscle toward the base of your neck is that muscle is lying in that upper ridge. Along with other aspects of your rotator cuff, your supraspinatus and the like. Okay, so this is just important to know that this acromion process marks the very top of the shoulder blade and the top of the glenohumeral joint, if you will. And then if you're willing to turn around, Lizzie, and show us your back. Okay, so now do Gomukhasana, take one arm into Gomukhasana and look for the bottom. Find your Gomukhasana and then sort of slip your fingers apart and use your lower hand. Are you able to find the bottom wingtip of your shoulder blade? Okay,
Here.
great. So bring your upper arm down and let's focus on your lower arm. So right now, Lizzie, it helps if you kind of chicken wing your shoulder blade, really pulling your shoulder blade off your back body a bit. Yes. Now, Lizzie, you can feel this ridge. Yes. Okay, so now you're feeling what's called the vertebral border of your shoulder blade or the medial border. And this is the shoulder blade edge that runs parallel to your thoracic spine. And then as you feel along that, you'll feel it kind of curve towards your outer body a bit, down low.
Here.
Yes, and you can kind of grab that little wingtip. That's called the inferior angle of your shoulder blade, and that tells you what direction the shoulder blades are oriented. And that's particularly important to us because if those inferior angles are pulling down toward the waist and toward the spine, we know then that we're moving the arms in extension, like in reverse plank position. And if those wingtips are moving away from the spine and pulling upward, we know we're in flexion. And so this is important. It's important to know the orientation of the inferior angles of the shoulder blades, because that's going to give us an idea of how much congruence, how much harmony there is between the head of the arm bone and the glenoid fossa. And
so one thing that was super obvious, but I had never considered it before and was a big aha when I started learning more anatomy, was to think about the joint that exists between the back of my rib cage and my scapula. Like how this sits and glides on there is actually super important, and the keeping that mobility as I age is actually really important for the kind of comfort, health, and well-being in my body, right?
Yes, and if we think about that, so it's called the scapulothoracic or sometimes the scapulocostal articulation. And the inferior angles, you can see that those give you an idea of how the shoulder blades are sliding and gliding. What position are they in as they slide over and around the ribs themselves? And if we pull up that pocket anatomy image again, Lizzie, notice that the shoulder blade is not a vertical bone, it's curved because the convex ribs, they fit in that fossa, that concavity that's created by the curve of the shoulder blades. So right there, when we look at this and we look at the bottom wingtips, we can see how necessary it is that we maintain our ability to protract or abduct, abduct, move the shoulder blades away from one another, away from the spine and around the ribs, as well as retract them, bringing them back together. Okay. And we can also see then why it's so important that when we take our arms up and overhead, that we make sure that we kind of pull the cart from those inferior angles so that the shoulder blades rotate upward from the bottom to orient that joint socket, that shallow joint socket, in the direction of the arms toward the head. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense to me. It's like this surface, this receiving surface, what you're saying is this receiving surface on the shoulder blade, this curved surface. If I try to move my arm independently, I can, but it's if I hold my shoulder blade still and move my arm, at some point I'm going to get stuck.
Yes, you can see that right there, Lizzie, right where you have the cursor. You're going to hit a bony block, and that bony block is the acromion process.
Exactly.
And that's going to play out, by the way. That's going to inhibit the ability of your collarbones to longitudinally rotate so that you can breathe fully. That's going to affect your head and neck position. And so that's why it's very important that we understand. You can put your hands, it's hard to do on yourself. I mean, we're pretty flexy bendy, so we'll just stick our arms behind us and do all this stuff. But, you can do this with a consenting partner. You can put your hands flat on someone's shoulder blades and feel the body of the shoulder blades, right? And then you can kind of work your fingers and feel the top inner edge called the trigone. It's hard to find because of the meaty traps, but then you can hold on to their wingtips very gently, hold on to those inferior angles, and have the person, ask the person, just move your arms all around, just moving the arms, and then have them practice shrugging and relaxing the shoulders, and you'll feel how important it is that the shoulder blades slide and glide over and around those ribs in order to have full access to your shoulder girdle.
Mom always says, in case you're getting older, do more back bends. And this makes me think of that, like, in case you're getting older, move your shoulder blades more.
Yes, like especially if if you wear a bra. Like, I remember my grandmother, in her 80s, and she needed care, and I would help provide care for her. And I remember she would, put her bra on and do the hooks and eyes in the front, and then she'd spin it around and pull it up. And, this isn't a indictment of bra design. That could be another video, but the point is, we want to maintain the ability to reach behind us, to handle those eyes and hooks, to reach for the buttons, and also just to open the chest, because we need to take the weight off of our heart and our lungs. And so it's important that we maintain this full range of motion, because shoulders are made to move.
What's so good about working with you is it's like I always fall more deeply in love with yoga. I'm like, yeah, I can't wait to practice tomorrow morning. It's so good. But I do think that's a key part of it. And I love that piece of experiential anatomy learning is often when we understand something more deeply, a process in the body, a shape of the body, it gives me new motivation, new activation for my asana practice. It's not that I am necessarily thinking so much about the shoulder blades, but it kind of like gives it a new richness or a depth about understanding and frankly, motivation to get on the mat again and again and again, because this is a lifelong practice. And there are days when we are like, this again. It's nice to remind ourselves of other aspects and motivating influences for our continued study.
Yes, because like the yoga doesn't end on the mat. That's the thing. And we live in our bodies our entire life cycle, whether we know it or like it. you know? And so I just believe the more intimate we become with our personal anatomy, the more comfortable we can become in our own skin. And see, that's what we share with people when we teach, right? Is we're sharing our own embodied experience in the context of asana, pranayama, and meditation. And so I just think I hope all this information is like curiosity provoking. Oh, I want to feel this for myself. And, you know, these aren't all of the bony landmarks. We're taking sort of the low hanging fruit. I mean, if you want to dig in, you know, if you want to kind of bring your arm out and stick in, you'll find the coracoid process, but that's not something you're going to look for on your students if you lead asana. So I want us to think about what it is that we can see and touch easily. And what do we learn by looking at those landmarks? Where do they lead us? Where do they lead our inquiry, our self-study?
Like, so good, Mary. Your like enthusiasm is just contagious. You're a wonder. Okay, let me show the websites. Let me show my little cards. Experientialanatomy.yoga. That's where you're going to go to get onto this free newsletter and get notified when we post new videos. This is Mary Richards' website, Yoga with Mary Richards. You should go there and find out what Mary's up to. My website is here at lizzie.yoga. You can sign up for my free weekly newsletter, Rest with Lizzie Lassiter. Last thing, I'll just show you once again Mary's book, Teach People Not Poses, which you should go ahead and order because you are not going to regret it. Mary Richards, thank you so much for your attention, for your time, for your enthusiasm, for your smile, for your simple way of explaining complex topics.
My pleasure, Lizzie. Thank you so much.